Good afternoon, and welcome to the Voice of Wisdom. With over 60 years of experience as an investment banker, entrepreneur, investment analyst, economist, and venture capitalist, Morty Davis is Wall Street and capitalism personified. The over 400 companies for which he has raised more than $3 billion over the years have created a countless number of jobs and exciting new products. Through the Voice of Wisdom, Mr. Davis explores, analyzes, and debates the most topical political, economic, and social issues facing our world today. Joining Mr. Davis today for a discussion on the issues leading up to the DNC is Len Carter. Len is an investment banker, business consultant, and private investor. And now, Mr. Davis and Mr. Carter.
Welcome back. It must be Wednesday, 6:30. And I look forward to this more than anything else during my entire week. Just listening to you, I don't listen to you right away, but the feedback that I get from you really gives me such joy and happiness, and more important than anything, gives me knowledge that I never had before. Your criticisms and your compliments both. But I learn more from the criticisms than from the compliments. So I want to thank you all to joining in this podcast, being my weekly cohorts. I'll get that out yet. Anyway, before we get into the discussion of civics, I guess it's called. When I went to school, it was called civics. Today, I don't know what they call it. Nothing has retained such neat names or clean names. So, but it's the events, current events that are going on that affect our lives dramatically, either right currently or in the course of the next few months, or even our children and grandchildren's lives. So I don't want to take up any more time, because that's the purpose, to get into the current events and the civic. And we're lucky, again, so lucky, I feel so lucky to have Len Carter with us today. People compliment me when they call up and they say, Morty, you should just let him do the whole program. He's so bright. So I think maybe I'll just do lip sync of like the deaf, the one that interpret for the deaf, and let him do the whole program, and I'll see if I can learn sign language. One guy one year was blind, came to a Passover Seder, and he picked up the matzah, not the shmura matzah, but the ones that have these little dents in it all over the matzah. And he picked it up and he said, the guy felt the matzah, he said it was Braille. And I said, who wrote this gibberish? So, anyway, I like to start the program because I know the rest of it's going to inevitably depress you, as it has often overwhelmingly depressed me. So before I add to your depression, I want to talk for 1 minute about any idea. And you could call in and give me your ideas, because we should share that, all of us. How to make each other happier, how to make our children happier, our husbands, our wives. Whatever you do, if I don't add anything else tonight, you should hug your kids and tell them how much you love them. And you might even do that to your husband or your wife. It might actually throw them into a shock. If you walked up and say, honey, I just want to tell you, you are great. Every day I see you, I talk to you, I appreciate you more. So that's a good beginning, a good way to begin. So the name of the book in front of you that I wrote with my daughter, Happiness Guaranteed, or Your Misery Back. Somebody said for sure that Morty, you should know, sure would know how to get misery back to the people you know. But really, it's turned out to be a much better, more rewarding effort and book than I had hoped, because I got so many calls, thank you calls, telling me how much they enjoyed the book, how it's lifted their mood, and so forth. So now I'm going to tell you, as I tell you every week, happiness is all in our own hands. And if I find out you're not happy, you're not smiling, you're not laughing, you're not counting your blessings, and appreciate all that you have, if you have good health. If you don't appreciate that you won the lottery by being born into this world and surviving and having most of your system work, you're the most blessed person. So smile. Ronald Reagan was so successful as a president because he had a great sense of humor. And he was always upbeat and always saying, we had the greatest country in the world. This country is blessed by God. So if I find that any of you are not happy, but you can make yourself happy. Remember, just the promise that God gave us, that we human beings are made in the image of God. That alone should make us happy. So be happy, don't worry. And I promise you, and I mean it, if I find out any one of you out there listening to this podcast is unhappy, I'm going to track down your address and come over there and beat you into happiness. Anyway, get a copy of the book. It's great. And I'm so sure you'll love it, as I tell you every week, that I will not only return your precious prize, I'll return double your precious prize, if you send me a copy of your precious slip where you bought it. You don't even have to send back the book. Just send it back, the precious slip, and tell me, Morty, I'm sorry, but I didn't enjoy it. I'm not getting anything out of it. I will definitely send you back double what you paid. But so far, I've had that offer out there with the biggest people for over a year now. I haven't had one.
No takers.
No. Anyway, let me get to Len Carter and have him make his major contribution. It's great.
So, thank you, Morty. So, a lot, as always, has been going on in the world the last week since our last get-together. And we have a second convention coming up next week, the Democratic National Convention, starting next Monday. So sort of leading up to that, we're a few weeks into the unprecedented change in Democratic ticket with Joe Biden stepping down and Kamala Harris becoming the presumptive nominee. So first, let's talk a little bit about, Kamala Harris's approach, strategy in the last few weeks, because the polls seem to be showing she's doing okay, certainly better than Joe Biden against Donald Trump. What do you think about her approach? Should she? One of the things she's been criticized for is not spending a lot of time with the press, answering questions, giving interviews, talking about issues. She's spending more time trying to create a feeling of goodness, which seems to be working, frustrating the Republicans, I think, but seems to be working. Do you think that's been a good approach, or should she at some point start addressing what the press has been requesting her to do? That is, start talking.
Well, in your statement, brief statement, you answered the question yourself, because whatever she's doing, or has been doing since Biden pulled out and named her as his favorite successor, she's gotten great reviews, great donations.
In the short term, yeah. But do you think that you can't keep that up through November 5th, right? I mean, you can't keep going until November 5th, avoiding interviews. At some point, it could. I don't know. That's really the question. Do you think you just keep the course, or and run the risk that it's gonna at some point backfire? Or do you just wait until that happens and then you address it?
Look, it's like I tell my children and now my grandchildren and even my great-grandchildren, when I see them make these beautiful babies and give us all this joy and rewards and nachas every time a new baby is born, I tell them, when you do something right, keep on doing it. They listen to me so much so far. Thankfully, that's the best part of my life. Not the money I made. Even that was helpful, because I was able to give a lot of it away to good causes that have improved other people's lives, and even promise in a very small way to improve the world, and to improve schools, and to make it a better world. Unfortunately, all of us, no matter how much we spend, we can only make a tiny difference. But if we do it all, if we work at it, each one of us making a tiny difference, each one of us smiling somebody else and making other people happy, the cumulative effect is that we have a better world.
So you think your advice to her would be just stay the course. Don't. It seems to be working. You're trying to create, an image of optimism and goodness and feel goodness. Certainly, her running mate, Governor Walz, is a happy, pleasant, person, and so that does jibe with her approach. How about on the other side? How about what you see Donald Trump doing? How wise do you think his approach is on continuing personal attacks and name calling, as opposed to what some of Republican strategists are saying he should focus on issues, because that's where his strengths are issues, her strengths are the feel-good side. So people are saying that Trump's doing it wrong, he should focus on issues, harp on inflation, harp on immigration, harp on all the things that he has an edge on, and not try to battle on, her being a bad person or a crazy person, or how she used to be, she became black, or all the attacks don't seem to be, or some people think, the right approach when he has some things which could be much more powerful, namely the issues.
Well, just like I said, if you do something right.
Well, but in this case, it's not really, because
it's worked up enough.
But he's
in the lead now. Oh no, he lost the lead. He was in the lead up to the time of the debate,
right?
But he still miraculously, despite all the terrible publicity, all the convictions and indictments, I find it really miraculous. I use that word,
That's and then the other word we hear is unprecedented. We hear that every day. Unprecedented.
It's a miracle. So I would have thought she'd be a million miles ahead of him by being upbeat, by being like Reagan, smiling. She's not. She can't. Maybe she's on the verge of doing it, but so far she hasn't buried his dream of winning for the third time. So, yeah, I do believe we need more discussion of policy and what they intend to do. And the only one that's done that so far is, in broad brushes, it's Trump who's done that. He says, well, but it's not policy. If you know one policy of his, it's trickle-down theory. To give more money to the rich, you're helping fuel the economy, and everybody benefits. And of course, the people at the lower end say, give the money to us. We have a higher propensity to spend the money. If we spend the money, these guys, these wealthy individuals that own these companies, will build more product,
hire more people, and create more jobs, right? So let's talk a little bit about some policy that is starkly different. I know you believe that the policy issue that Democrats should emphasize the most, which you believe will help them the most, is reproductive rights, as we've seen in the last two elections, being a substantive issue as part of the platform. But we still, even though a majority of the country may support reproductive rights, you still see Trump supporting his decision, or not decision, but his actions, which led to the overturn of Roe versus Wade, and then supporting that, saying he stands by it because the states now can decide who, or the states can decide who, or what the reproductive rights rules should be. And his argument is, what could be more democratic than letting the individual states at the individual state level make those decisions? So I know you believe that there should be more of a law of the land, but how do you counter that argument that says, why do you need a law of the land when you let each state make their own decision? What could be more democratic than letting each state make its own decision?
Well, I think that's clearly largely misunderstood. But if everybody made their own decision based on their own beliefs and there were no limitations, no guidelines, even punishments, we would be, the human being is not intrinsically a good, should I say, animal, because there's no other animal that kills its own as much as the human being does, and develops more weapons of destruction than the human being. So I don't know what it means that if you give everybody a right and make it more democratic, it's going to be better.
Well, but each state could put it to a referendum, and if the state decides that abortion should be totally banned, then they vote for that. 6-week ban, they vote for that. 12-week ban, they vote for that. So every state has the opportunity to have more representation of its citizens' views. And if every state, if everybody in the country within every state thought that there should be no regulation, then there would be no regulation. Why do you believe that a federal edict, one way or the other, saying it's allowed or it's not allowed, why is that better than letting individual states make the decision? Because that says that the federal government knows better than the individual states.
I think at some level we all understand that there are certain decisions that have, even if it's your own decision, have much broader impact and affect the rest of our fellow human beings, whether within the country or within the world. So the reason regulations have evolved is not because people like to be more constrained. If anything, everybody would like to be unconstrained.
I agree.
But when you say there are good things and bad things, if everybody wanted to start their own fire so they could roast marshmallows, and you say that, well, that's democratic, that's a good thing. It's not a good thing.
Well, I agree that there are certain actions that states can take which have detrimental effect on other states. For example, if every state decided its own pollution laws, air quality laws, and one state said, we don't care about air pollution at all, so do whatever you want. And then the neighboring state has rules that say you can't, you have to do something about your emissions. If one state has no rules, air is something that goes between one state and another, so you can't separate that. That I can understand. But a rule that talks about when you are permitted to have or not have an abortion, for example, how does, if what you let me see in your argument, how does, say, Alabama banning abortion detrimentally impact the citizens of Kentucky who may allow abortion, or the citizens of New York who may allow, or that state may allow it?
But you start off saying democracy should be that everybody would be happier if they could make their own determination.
Well, no.
That's what you're saying.
No, not on every issue. Pollution is one of them. I'm saying not on issues where you can't contain it within a state, like air. You can't contain air within Alabama. So if Alabama pollutes the air, it affects Mississippi, it affects Texas, it affects Arkansas. That's different. So in that case, I'm not saying every issue should be democratic, but certain issues should be. because they are contained within the state.
I don't believe that.
So how? If Alabama bans abortion, how is that not contained in Alabama?
Republicans used to be, if that's against democracy, then you could say they were anti-democratic. But people should be left to their own decisions, to their own, and government shouldn't be that intrusive. Here you're saying, well, they have more freedom. They have less freedom. If I want to have an abortion, I shouldn't be forced to have a baby because some men in Washington determined that I'm doing the wrong thing.
But they didn't.
It's my baby.
No, but if you allow the individual state to make its decision, it may or may not agree with the decision made in Washington.
But I'm saying that's not more democratic. It's more intrusive.
How?
Because they're imposing a decision on me as a citizen.
The federal government is.
No, the state is.
But you vote. No, but you were one who voted in the state. But you voted in the referendum as a state citizen. You voted in the referendum to allow or not allow.
That's where I take issue with democracy. I don't think it should be that uncontrolled. If everybody votes, and people, I could understand how that could occur. I drive home sometimes 2 o'clock in the morning, and there's a red light in front of me. I don't see a car around for miles. I'm in a hurry to get home, and I stop for the red light. Why? That's stupid. We do it because overall we determined that even though I have less freedom of choice, overall it helps society. So you say, well, but having a baby is not that way when the state votes. I don't want everybody's vote, even though it's more number, to intrude on my freedom of choice. And you're saying freedom of choice is great, especially if it's within the state's rules, where the federal government could be stricter. But you're saying
that whatever that the rule the federal government makes is better than the rule that the state can make on its own. Otherwise, you would allow the state to make its own rules on abortion, for example. But you're saying that the state shouldn't make their own rules on abortion because the federal government can make the decision better. I mean, that is the view, but that's not one that will ever, that the country rather will ever grant. So let's talk about an issue.
The country has developed that.
No.
We have tons and tons of regulations.
Yes.
That people are against. They would say turn it over to the states.
So that's why we're not going to get a consensus on whether the states' rights versus the federalism is always an issue.
Through the overriding Constitution, hopefully, we let.
Right. Part of this issue.
A larger number of government of people are the ones from throughout the country.
But part of the issue relating to reproductive rights is a constitutional issue, right? On what things should the federal government set and do, and what should they let the states do? And the issue, the answer is always, if it says in the Constitution, then it's a federal issue. And if it
I think they're bombing us for this conversation.
And then if it doesn't specify explicitly, then it's up to the states. So, But let's talk about something that seems to be.
Why do you stop there? Why do you have to make it a state? Why don't they have every 10 blocks you set up a government or whatever is equivalent? And for those 10 blocks, the people within those 10 blocks
Because that's not how the Constitution works.
have a, that's what I'm saying.
But the Constitution does say that the states shall be granted, that those rights to govern themselves on all issues not specified in the Constitution. It does say that. So, then it becomes, is reproductive rights a constitutional issue?
Did it say that about slavery when it was first written? I don't think so.
Well, until there was an amendment in the Constitution for slavery, it did. That's why it was determined on the state level. It was.
Before that?
It was determined on state level. That's what I'm saying. It was.
Before that?
But before there was a constitutional amendment. That's exactly what I'm saying.
And that was bad. In my view, that was bad.
But it was, it's the law of the land until it changed.
Yeah, but you're saying let every 10 blocks over.
No, I'm not saying that.
Why did you say state?
Because that's what the Constitution says.
Yeah, well, they were wrong.
Constitution doesn't say block by block has the right. It says states have the right.
So in a way, it was not well thought out.
Maybe.
Not everything in the Constitution has turned out to be.
Oh, look, I mean, brilliant. Federalism versus states' rights is a topic, discussion, issue, debate that will transcend many things.
So you're right. Some people who still think royalty and a king is best, having one leader make the decision.
But let's talk about an issue which I've rarely seen, where both sides actually are saying the same thing, and that's taxing tips, or not taxing tips, as the case may be. So former President Trump came out a while ago saying he didn't believe that service workers' tips should be taxed, and just recently Vice President Harris said the same thing. I also believe. Now, it's a popular, in typical Trump form, it's a populist view, because it's a popular view not to have those types of taxes, that type of income taxed. But here you have a rarity where both sides actually agree that it shouldn't be taxed. Do you think that's a good thing? Or why should it be limited? Why do service workers get special treatment and have their income not taxed, but say teachers have their income taxed? And I know at one point you thought, teachers should be exempt from taxes for particular reasons, but while there were lots of arguments for that to be the case, there's also arguments to say, why is it special treatment for one group? So what's your take on the tips? Should tips be taxed or not?
Well, that's an interesting discussion, and for me particularly, because when I was young, I worked as a busboy and a waiter, and I worked in those jobs as from Memorial Day to Labor Day in substantial hotels throughout the Catskills and throughout the world even. And I could never tell you if it was a good thing or a bad thing. If you could, as they do today, some places have, before you pay the check, it says right on it, 20% or whatever it is. But the good restaurants, I think, have 20% service fee. supposedly. And they like that because it doesn't put the customer that's eating there under duress. Is he tipping enough? Is he tipping too much? If he doesn't tip enough, will he not get good service next time? So it's a meaningful issue. On the other hand, once it's developed, because when I was young, there was no credit card that it was assigned to. So each of us collected our own tax. The boss didn't know how much we earned that way. You were the only one that knew what kind of tips it. And now it can appear on your credit card, and since most of them, many of those fees are put right on the bill that you paid. So it simplifies life. You don't have to think about it. There's a lot of resentment. Why they put? I may not want to tip. I may not be happy with the waitress that I had.
Right. But that's the issue of tipping. But this is an issue of taxation to the waiter or waitress. So if you do tip a waiter, that's income to the waiter. Should the waiter then be taxed on that income? It's income. It's right. That's their job. So it is income. It's just through a tip. Maybe a bigger tip if they do a good job, or a smaller tip if they do not as good a job. But
how's the government going to know how much to tip?
Well, these days, most restaurant checks are paid on a credit card, so the tip is on the credit card. So the restaurant knows how much of the tip, how much of the check is a tip. And then when they report the waiter's W-2, they can break apart his or her.
If I want to take good care of my waiter,
Yeah.
I'll slip him a $20 bill.
Right, but
that's not on the tip.
Correct, but most of waiters' tips are on the check. So should those tips be tax-free?
Well, once it's on the check, then in a sense, the owner of the establishment has a lot more control.
Right, but
may not report it to the government.
Well, they do. They would have. I mean, they have to because it's revenue to them through the same.
They could treat it as their own revenue.
They do.
So
it's if they
don't have to. Or they could.
No, but that's not the question. If a restaurant has a $100 meal,
no rules about that.
If a restaurant,
if you see a tip on the owner of the facility,
right,
and you see there was a $20 tip
right,
put on, I could, as the owner, I could choose to return that for $20 to the waiter and not keep any of it, or I could determine to put it on my
right. Well, I mean, the waiter.
There's no law right now about that.
I mean, I don't think if a waiter can see what the tips are on each check, because when you fill out the bill, you say how much the tip is. If the owner decided to do what you say and just keep all the tips for himself, the waiter would know that he's not getting his tips because he sees what his tips are. I do believe that would be a labor law violation for an employer not to give tips to, but that's not even what we're discussing. The point is, should those tips, whatever they are, be taxed, or should it be tax-free income to the waiter?
Look, one of the reasons.
I mean, why should one particular service group, waiters, have a portion of their income tax-free, but other people don't? Should
Why?
they?
Why do some people get
So
special tax treatment?
that's my
For
question.
their gains, much bigger issue than tips.
But
Because to achieve
that's
taxes are supposed to be used
right.
to incentivize certain behavior. So, do you want to?
So
Do you want to? One of the reasons that the management liked tips then, and the busboys and waiters liked tips, was the management liked it because it reduced their need to pay higher salaries.
right.
And the busboys and waiters liked it because it was off the books, they got paid.
Right, but it's not so much off the books anymore because of how much tips are part of credit card payments. So the question is, should those tips be tax-free? Would you support Kamala Harris's view they should be tax-free, and Donald Trump's view they should be tax-free? I would say I don't think they should be, because
You don't think they should be?
tax-free, no, because I don't think you single out one particular group. Why don't teachers?
We do.
But it's not. But I know we do. But that doesn't mean it's the right thing to do.
You're saying, why should we?
Right.
We do throughout. Do we single out the oil companies get special treatment? Of course we do.
So is that an argument to do it?
No, it depends what the goal is.
So what's the
I'm
goal?
telling you, since I was in that position, on both sides of that position, I don't know what is the better, because the way it was before, clearly the owners felt it was beneficial to them to let the waiters and the busboys keep that kicker and not put it on the bill.
Well, they've always kept it. It's a question of, is it taxed? Those are different questions. It's not whether you keep it. It's whether you have to report it as income.
In the old days, I never told my boss what.
But that's a different issue. Whether or not you report your income is not the issue here.
So it was beneficial to the owner to let the employee keep the tips so he could keep them on a lower salary.
Right.
And
but the same thing is true today, except the tips are taxed. That's all. The only difference that we're talking about here is whether or not the waiter, when he or she files his tax return, it says wages, salaries, and tips is the first line on the 1040 form. Wages, salaries, and tips. I mean, waiters are supposed to. Whether they commit tax fraud is another issue. That's between them and the government. But they're supposed to put on that line all of their wages, salaries, and tips. So that number that goes on their on their 1040 form, of course, that's what you're supposed to do. I'm not saying what people do.
There wasn't even a line there.
Always was. Wages, salaries, and tips is the first line on a 1040.
Okay. I never put that in all the years I worked.
But that doesn't mean that was.
I don't know if it was a requirement.
Well, let's put it this way. Today, it's a requirement.
Yeah.
So a waiter who puts cash tips in their pocket is committing tax fraud when they fill out their tax form. Now, that's a separate issue. A lot of people commit tax fraud in different ways. That's one of them. So the question is,
it's very sad that becomes one of the issues that the two parties agreed on.
Well,
when they can't agree on the minimum wage,
yes,
which is a much higher.
Right. Right. No, that I agree. That's why I don't think this tax tips issue is the right issue. The right issue is, what should tax rates be for people in that level of income, and what should the minimum wage be? Because that's something for all sectors of work. I don't think there should be something special for waiters or for teachers or for electricians or for accountants. Everybody, the job you do shouldn't determine whether or not you have special treatment. The tax law and minimum wage law, that is what should be addressed in order to have the behavior modifications that you want.
No, but we as a government and the people have a vested interest. You know why? Most of the people overwhelmingly started at a McDonald's or at a restaurant, and so it influences the lives of many people. So will it discourage people from taking the startup jobs or not? Or will it discourage employers from hiring them if they don't keep the tips? So it has other ramifications. I don't think you make it on the basis of
it's not whether they can keep the tips. It's whether they're taxed on the tips. They can always keep the tips. It's their money.
Yeah.
It's just a question of whether it's taxable income or is it like a muni bond where it's not taxable income.
But the guy who owns the restaurant could make it a condition of your employment that all tips belong to the business.
Okay, but what does that have to do with whether tips are taxed?
There's no way you'll be, if they make it belong to the business, you have no involvement.
Right, except the issue here is whether service businesses where people get tips should be taxed. So if a restaurant establishment or any other business where, people are tipped, maids or wherever.
You have to ask the people involved. The restaurant wants to keep the tips so they could pay them less. Or wants to let the waiter and busboy keep the tips.
But they always
keep the less.
But it's not a question of keeping the tips. It's a question of whether the busboy has to report the tips as income.
Not if he doesn't keep any of it.
But that's not what this proposal is. It's
if
that
the restaurant says
it's that
you come to work in a restaurant, and in our restaurant, all the tips that go on the bill are kept by the management.
But that's not what this proposal is. This proposal that Trump and Harris are saying is that restaurants and workers...
That rule would prevail.
It would, but that's not the issue here.
Would it become an issue?
It might, but that's not this issue that we're talking about.
It might not, because the busboy or the waiter never gets his hand on a penny of that.
Right.
So you can't tax.
Right, but that's not how it works now. We're talking about how it works now, which is that waiters get tips.
I don't think that the company can't keep the tips.
But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about company. The way that it works now is restaurants give the tips that the waiters earn to the waiters.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Okay, I don't know.
And so the question is, when the restaurant gives the tips to the waiter, does the waiter report that as income?
How about if the
because waitresses are paid a low wage because they get to keep their tips.
How about if the guy sitting at the table gives the guy a cash tip? How does the owner report that?
They don't, but the waiter reports it.
No, they don't.
How do you know?
I never reported it.
That's how you operate, but doesn't mean that a waiter.
It wasn't equal.
It was, but it is now. It's always been.
Not if the establishment has, if you could have either policy.
But we're not talking about that. We're talking about whether waiters who get tips. No, waiters today get tips. Some are cash, some are on credit card. So whatever they get as tips, when they file their 1040 form, the first line says wages, salaries, and tips. They are supposed to report the tips that they got from their work.
Yeah.
Whether if they do or don't, that's up to them, and that's tax fraud if they don't. But they are supposed to report tips. This proposal that we're talking about from Trump and Harris says, no, you don't have to report tips. And I'm saying,
Well, what's their basis?
because,
They're saying that they're cheating the government if they're not.
well,
Report.
what Harris and Biden are saying is they no longer have to report them. They're supposed to report them, and many do, particularly ones that get tips through credit cards because their employer tells them. When a waiter gets a paycheck, or at the end of the year, they will get a breakdown of how much they made in wages and how much they made in tips. And so what these guys are saying is that line that says your tip income, don't have to put that on your tax return anymore. And I'm saying, I don't think that's right. They should put it on their tax return, just like a teacher has to put all his or her income on the tax
I'm
return.
saying that's the problem with this government and this country and this democracy. Because we focus on things that are so minuscule and
Yes,
instead of dealing with guns, or
right,
instead of the price of drugs,
right.
or all the things.
Look, how did this
that could be
become?
corrupted.
How did this become an issue?
Because
It's a populist view. How did it become an issue? Trump was at, a convention of hotel workers.
Yeah.
So how do you say something that what do hotel workers want to hear?
And he's at Mar-a-Lago too.
Right. What do they want to hear? They want to hear a policy that's good for them. Well, what's the most simple, direct policy that's good for hotel workers? Your tips aren't taxed. Great. And then what does Harris have to do?
No,
she can't say, well, I don't agree with Trump. She has to follow suit.
If they want to help those lawyers, those workers, they could have a.
You want to help lawyers?
No, that's a measurement.
No, that's a reverse policy. All lawyers have to be.
If they really wanted to help in a significant
They'd get rid of the lawyers.
That's for sure.
They would change the minimum wage, or they would change the tax rate.
No. If they really wanted to help, this has been proposed by a lot of industries, that you take a portion of the company's total income, put it in a pool, and distribute it, either in wages or in bonuses.
Right.
If you really want to help them, do something
Right. That's a form of raising wages, right? You could also raise the minimum wage so that they don't have to, so that tips aren't as big an issue.
Yeah.
You could also change the tax rates so that people that don't make a lot aren't taxed as much. Right? There's a lot of things you could do rather than targeting service workers. It was a populist view.
It shows you that they pick up on the
Right.
most ridiculous things.
And then what does she have to do?
How many people does it affect?
Right.
How much does it affect?
Right.
And how do you monitor them?
But it's
all of a sudden the waiters up. The IRS sends people to the restaurants to see how they handle it, and if it's reported, instead of all the guys that are ripping off the government. But it shows you the ones that are easy.
But it shows how
it's easy for them to.
It shows how
stupid
and how just policy. When right after Trump came out with this, Kamala Harris has to come out with the same policy. Otherwise, she looks like she's a anti-worker.
Absolutely.
So,
but that's what it sinks down to. Instead of dealing with should we have assault weapons or not assault weapons,
right.
But people are getting killed we have more than one assault every day. Did you know that?
Mass shooting every day.
One.
At least. Yep.
More than one. And nobody gets all riled up. We haven't talked about it. They deal with the easy ones and the ones that people can understand or identify with, or at least argue with.
Right. And I think she's, because a few bigger issues that that Harris is in favor of, Medicaid for all, and she's a supporter of the Green New Deal. So, but you don't hear her really getting behind those these days, because that is, it's a huge lightning rod for her, and an easy argument for Republicans to come back and say, look what she wants to do, the socialist Green New Deal and Medicare for all is going to bankrupt the country. Who's going to pay for that? The usual responses. Even if those were, policies that could benefit the country,
who pays for it in countries that are far poorer than us? And also, even on inflation, of all the countries in the world, advanced countries, we have the lowest, even under Biden. So it shows it has nothing to do with things that Biden's doing. It's what you said. It's the fact that it takes a lot to deliver it. Delivery used to be nothing. When I was a kid, UPS is the independent one. The workers were like, slobs. It wasn't an important industry. Now the workers get the profit sharing. They got distribution of shares when they get, and it's a big business. But it never used to be. The guy from American Smith, American FedEx, figure out, big business.
That is true. We are just about out of time.
There's so many special deals in the democracy, not only on taxes but on activities, on regulations, on getting approvals. So and there's important ones and a lot important, way less important ones. But the most important ones usually are the ones that the lobbyists and the big companies pay a lot to buy what they want. It's not a democracy. Just like I say, now I figured out, I don't know if Marx would be so angry at capitalism when he sees that in those days they didn't have anything like this, a bigger tax on the people that, because there is a route today, a redistribution. The rich people say it's a communist country. I worked, why are you taking money that I worked for? These guys didn't work for. That's communism or socialism.
Well, any form, there are people who believe any form of wealth redistribution is socialist, or which, but I shouldn't say that. That people who believe it's bad, we'll call it whatever you want, it's bad.
Adam Smith didn't discuss that. He discussed the validity of capitalism as a form of incentive. You could make it cheaper, then you're going to be rewarded, and that's how a society is going to grow and work and create employment. And between countries too, it turned out that was a good way. Today, Trump is saying he wants to raise it 100% on some products. He doesn't want to be able to sell maybe. And I used to ask that too. Why do we let Japan do all the advertising to take away our car market when that used to be, like what the guy said from General Motors, what's good for General Motors?
It's good for America.
Yeah.
Well, there was a time when 1 out of every 2 cars on the planet was a General Motors car.
Mm.
Now their worldwide market share is probably 15% or something.
There was a time when one of every car had 4 wheels.
So, All right. Well, thanks for an interesting
Thank
discussion.
you,
We'll be
Len
back in a week.
Carter. It's
We've got a
great,
convention
isn't it?
coming, so we'll definitely have some interesting material to
It's great.
banter.
I'm going to sell posters or memes of him.
Yeah, definitely memes.
Anyway, thank you for joining me and Len Carter and the rest of our cohorts, all of you that choose to listen, be part of this. Thank you for joining me every Wednesday at 6:30. I look forward to being back with you in good health a week from tonight. And God bless you all. Have good health. Have outstanding success in all that you pursue and dream about, and have genuine, uplifting happiness. You and all your loved ones. God bless you. Have a great week.